Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:06. It's O'Connor and Company on this Thursday, 7th day of November. No, it wasn't a dream. He really won. Donald Trump, president-elect. In fact, he'll be meeting with Joe Biden. And at 6:35, we'll speak with James Rosen, NewsMax White House correspondent, about that and about what the mood is like over there at the White House. How's Dr. Jill taking it? We'll get into all of that. At 7:05, Brent Pozell, Media Research Center, on whether the media was the big loser as well this week. 7:35, Andy McCarthy, talk about the status of the criminal suits as well as the civil suits still pending against Donald Trump. And then at 8:05, KT McFarland on what the world looks like after this election day 2024. There's a lot still to break down about this extraordinary, historic election, and I'm glad we've got Patrice Onwuka to help us out. You know, everyone's like, oh, Mercedes is still doing NewsMax duties. She's been doing mornings in NewsMax all week long. She and Matt are up in New York. This is a busy time for people in this business,
I'm sure.
Patrice.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's fun to be on with you guys this morning, Larry. I'm still jubilant. I really am. I'm trying to rein myself in because I know some folks are crying and, holding their teddy bears and coloring books right now.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to measure my response.
You know, Patrice, I always work through the holidays here. I don't know why.
Yes.
I like doing the show that week between Christmas and New Year's. It's just sort of fun and it's just, we can
lighthearted.
And because of that, I often, people who have listened for years know that generally speaking, that week before Christmas is when I take my vacation. I take a Christmas vacation with Meredith. And over the last several years, we've been going with Meredith's parents, and then we added an aunt and an uncle and her brother. And it's become sort of a little pre-Christmas family vacation that I go on with my in-laws. And one of my favorite texts, election night, it was like 2:30 in the morning I got from my brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law sent me a text and said, we are going to have the greatest cruise ever.
Wow.
Our mood is going to be so jubilant, right? We're all going to be in a great mood. It does make a difference in people's lives. I know, I keep saying politics isn't everything, but it's something. It's definitely something. And when things are going bad, it's bad. And when things are going good, well, which brings us to the lawfare that is currently still in place against Donald Trump. What is going to happen with some of the cases? Now, we'll get on to some of the good news in a moment with regard to the special prosecutor, Jack Carr, and his investigation, his criminal investigation into Donald Trump. But what about the sentencing that is still pending?
That's right.
In 3 weeks, Donald Trump, the former president and now president-elect, who will be sworn into office, and he will be the chief executive of the executive branch of our government and our head of state, he is due in a Manhattan courtroom where he is supposed to be sentenced over the ridiculous Stormy Daniels non-disclosure agreement case.
That's right, yeah.
What will happen? Can they sentence him?
Happen.
What can they do? And can you sentence... We know you can't prosecute a sitting president, but he's already been prosecuted. It's pending appeal. Can you sentence a convicted president-elect? We don't know. We've never had to deal with this.
This has never happened before. That's right. So according to this reporting here, this is in Politico. The headline is, Trump is due to be sentenced in 3 weeks. It probably won't happen. In theory, Judge Juan Merchan, he could proceed with the sentencing as scheduled. And order that any sentence be deferred until 2029. But, Larry, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that all of this has been exposed as a purely undemocratic election ploy to keep President Trump from winning. He won. Now these people are going to. I think I don't think he's going to be sentenced. It wouldn't surprise me if the judge decided just to dismiss any sort of sentencing whatsoever. It's done and call it a day.
Really?
That's what I think.
That could be the case, but it would also sort of, shed a light on the fact that the entire thing was political anyway.
Absolutely.
Which it was, of course. I think whatever happens, it gets reversed in appeal anyway. But, let's see. We've got charges brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James, now she's the one who went after him in this extraordinary sort of bizarre civil trial over the banking irregularities. These are facing appeal right now. This is the one where the judge got to make the entire ruling. There wasn't even a jury, not that the jury would have been fair anyway. This was meant to bankrupt Donald Trump and also to say, and he's got all these cases. This is pending appeal. They've already made their case to the appellate court, and it sounded during the appeal that the appellate judges were very skeptical of this prosecution. But yesterday, Attorney General Letitia James in New York
did not expect this result, but we are prepared to respond to this result. And my office has been preparing for several months because we've been here before. We faced this challenge before. And we use the rule of law to fight back.
Wow, that is chilling.
Use the rule of law to fight back? What is fight back against what?
Yeah, when she says we did not expect this result, but she's not talking about a decision brought down by a judge or a jury.
No.
She's talking about the election. She's talking about the voice of the people.
Yes.
These are the people who love democracy, right? Oh, democracy, democracy, democracy. It's going to be the end of democracy. Was she saying we didn't expect this result, meaning that he would win the election, meaning voters would actually vote for him, but we will use the law to fight back. So she's going to use the law and the power of her office to fight back against who? Against us, against voters, against we the people, the majority.
She sounds eerily similar to a former California Attorney General who said, when I realize the power I have in my pen, I can determine people's fates very easily, and I will use that pen, and I wielded it, and I'm not afraid to. And we've seen that Attorney General, who, by the way, she lost the election yesterday for president. She locked up parents for truancy. The list goes on. But it's very interesting when you see these prosecutors, how they love the power that they have because they can't cut it in the financial world. They can't cut it in the private sector. So they're going to abuse their judicial power against regular folks.
I want to remind you that Andy McCarthy is going to be joining us to break all of this down coming up later in the program. He's scheduled for 7:35. Former Attorney General Bill Barr yesterday told Fox Digital that he thinks that all prosecutors at the state and local level should immediately dismiss every single pending case against Donald Trump. I doubt that will happen, but MSNBC does have a report about the special prosecutor's case against Donald Trump that's still open. This would be Jack Smith's case. He's still trying to prosecute him over January 6th, and he's also trying to pick up the prosecution over the Presidential Records Act with the morning raid at Mar-a-Lago. We will tell you what MSNBC had to say about Jack Smith and those investigations in mere moments. First, though, 6:15, quickly, WMAL traffic and weather. Every 10 minutes, first on the fives with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
Boy, we're getting busy on the Beltway. Montgomery County, let's start with you. Outer Loop crash before you get to River Road. They just moved everything over to the right shoulder, I'm happy to say. But we're jammed before Old Georgetown Road and off the 270 spur. The new accident in the Tysons area giving us slowdowns. Inner Loop after the toll road. They're still trying to sort things out here. So as you head past 123, have patience as fire and rescue units arrive to that scene. Now from GarageDoorRepair.com, the WMAL Stormwatch 7 forecast.
We have actually rather pleasant weather, if I don't mind telling you. Once we get through the scattered showers we should see this morning. After that, it'll be cloudy. It's fall after all, but our high will be 77 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy skies, overnight low 51. Friday is sunny with a high of 71. That's really looking like the best day of the week. Saturday is going to be sunny, but a little chillier with a high of 61. And then Sunday, look for some afternoon showers. Cloudy skies with a high of 61 degrees. Right now, it's still hanging at 66 degrees at 6:16.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
News is brought to you by Baird Financial.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
Yeah, Chris, it's not a surprise that these cases can't go forward when Donald Trump takes office. What's interesting here is that the DOJ is moving to end them even before he takes office. citing the long-standing DOJ policy that sitting presidents can't be prosecuted. And there was some thought that maybe Special Counsel Jack Smith was going to sprint through the finish line, was going to work up until the last day, force Trump to fire him, wait till a new attorney general was appointed. But that does not appear to be the thinking inside the department. The thinking is that these cases can't go forward. There's no reasonable prospect of getting to trial within the 3 months before Donald Trump takes office. These cases are mired in legal issues that would be appealed all the way to the Supreme Court had Donald Trump lost the election. So now that he's won the election, DOJ officials are thinking that, look, there's just no room to move in these cases. And so the sensible thing to do is to figure out a way to wind them down. And it may stem from Donald Trump's lawyers filing some kind of motion or making a request saying in light of the DOJ policy, you need to drop these cases. Now, there are a few wrinkles here, one of which is that the classified documents case includes 2 other defendants who are not subject to that policy. And it's been dismissed, obviously, but that dismissal has been appealed. And the DOJ considers that ruling to be very bad law that it would like to be overturned. So that appeal may continue in some form. But the reality is that Donald Trump is not going to be a part of these cases. And what this means, I mean, we knew this, right? But just coming to grips with what this means intellectually is that Donald Trump is not likely to be held accountable on these very serious federal criminal charges that many people believe were worse than what Richard Nixon did or was accused of doing in Watergate. Now, there's no guarantee that Donald Trump would have been convicted at trial, but as Joyce Vance, our legal commentator, said to me this morning, what's not going to happen is he's not going to face a jury of his peers who would evaluate the evidence and render a verdict. It's going to be lost to history whether a jury would have found him guilty of these very serious crimes.
Very serious. We wanted you to hear the
very
whole
serious
thing.
Watergate.
Yes,
I mean,
worse
Richard,
than Nixon,
just throw it all in there.
Never be held accountable for giving a speech on the ellipse. All right, that's the report from MSNBC, and it's absolutely delicious. Bottom line, Jack Smith, you're fired. The special prosecutor is closing up shop. All charges pending at the federal level against Donald J. Trump immediately dropped. The question is, and I will raise this with Andy McCarthy coming up at 7:35, is what about all of the new investigations that no doubt have already begun? The secret ones, the ones just like what James Comey was. Let's just remember that 8 years ago today, when Donald Trump was again president-elect of the United States, the FBI director, James Comey, with the full knowledge of the Attorney General, the CIA director, the National Director of National Intelligence, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden and Susan Rice, they had an active investigation into Donald Trump, his campaign. They had surveillance. They had FISA warrants. They were already investigating him over the bogus Steele dossier and the Russian collusion hoax. So, yes, Jack Smith, the prosecution of Donald Trump that we knew about that was unconstitutional, that's now been dismissed, and they've shut it all down. What about what they're doing right now that we don't know about, Patrice?
I can only imagine what story they're spinning up. It's so, I think, a bigger point that this is what they do when they've been desperate. And for the past 2 years now, they thought they made a bad bet, which is that they thought Americans would not vote for a felon, and they thought that by stacking charges, it had hit over 90 charges against President Trump at some point, that was going to be what would undercut his presidency, undercut his run for the presidency, and that didn't happen. In fact, it became a rallying cry. Remember, but before there was the iconic assassination photo, there was the mugshot of President Trump that they thought would be his undoing, when in fact it was probably the first big punch of energy into the electorate in support of President Trump. So I hope that they've learned their lesson about lawfare, but somehow I don't think they have. I don't think they have.
Haven't. This is because this is the world they've been living in ever since Watergate. Of course they raised Watergate as an issue here because they hated the fact that people need to remember, because it was like Nixon is vilified, Nixon is hated. In 1972, Richard Nixon won 49 out of 50 states.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
He won re-election in an overwhelming fashion. They couldn't defeat Richard Nixon. And so that's when the Watergate investigation was really sort of juiced up. I mean, it had begun before the re-election campaign, but nowhere near what it became. And with regard to this whole idea of they thought that the American people wouldn't vote for a felon, let me just be clear on this. Here's Sunny Hostin, if we can go back to her on the View yesterday.
Of course.
Again, I'm profoundly disturbed that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution did not prevent someone who participated in an insurrection from becoming president of the United States. I think that going forward, the convicted felon box on employment applications better be taken off, because if you can be the president of the United States, then you should.
I can't believe this woman is in some way respected for her intellect and that she actually has a law degree. All right, real fast.
Right.
There are only two things that keep you from being president. It's in the Constitution. If you're under 35 and if you're not a naturally born citizen. Other than that, there is no other precondition.
That's right.
Period.
Yes.
Yes, and that includes being a convicted felon. All right, set that aside for a moment. This whole idea, well, they better remove the box on a job application. The box on the job application is to notify your potential employer that you have been convicted of a felony. Then the employer can take that information, look at it, ask you about it, get more information about it, and then the employer can make that decision.
Yeah.
We, the people, just hired Donald Trump, all right?
Yes, we did.
Knowing full well he was prosecuted. And we didn't disregard the fact that he was prosecuted. We asked about it. We looked at it. We looked at the circumstances surrounding it, and we decided that felony prosecution was bull crap. And so we went ahead and hired him. So that's the bottom line here, and that's really what this is about.
Well, and it's unfair for her to then turn this into a check-the-box removal argument. I mean, there are lots of people who say, okay, if you have served your time, you should be able to be instituted into society, be able to be brought back into society and have a lot of those privileges returned to you. But that's different than what she's trying to say.
Yeah.
They've made it a judgment about President Trump based on pretty bogus stuff that was brought against him. So, you know, the point is it backfired on them.
That's
and
right.
They've come to realize that they couldn't yank him off the ballots illegally. They couldn't yank him off the ballots through lawfare and every other method because the people care about policies, not personality.
Yeah, I did. The remove the box from the application movement needs to be shut down, and the fact that they're using this as some sort of because here's the thing. I'm all for rehabilitation. I'm all for serving your time. I'm all for forgiveness. If you've been convicted from a felony, let the employer know about it, the potential employer. Guess what? Not all felonies are the same. If you were convicted and served your time for child molestation, and I'm hiring somebody for a daycare center, I'm not going to hire you. I'm not going to hire you to be a kindergarten teacher if you've been convicted of child molestation. Okay, not all felonies are the same. It's 6:24.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37, and we are rolling along here on a very busy Thursday morning. Things get busy after an election, especially after a historic election like this one. A landslide, I think, is the way to. Let's call it a red wave, red tsunami. At least in those battleground states. Let's say this election boiled down to those 7 states, right?
Yes.
Sunbelt states is North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and then the so-called blue wall, which is looking pretty red right now. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And when you look, that's where the campaign was engaged. That's where the election took place, and it's a clean sweep. It's a clean sweep for Donald Trump and the Republican ticket. That spells red wave, including the coattails that bring in, it looks like, 4 new Republican senators, giving the majority up to 53, it appears. Once Pennsylvania is called for Mr. McCormick for the brand new president-elect, Donald Trump. There's a lot to unpack here, Patrice Onwuka. Glad you're here with us all morning. Oh, yes.
I'm excited to be here to talk about this red wave tsunami, whatever you want to call it. We went red. And by the way, the popular vote going for President Trump means that the red wave was nationwide, not just in those 7 states.
I'm very much looking forward to Joe Scarborough reminding everyone that the popular vote is meaningless now. Coming up at 7:05, Brent Pozell on the media and how they fared in this election. 7:35, Andy McCarthy on this subject. We just discussed the pending cases against Trump. And then at 8:05, KT McFarland on the status of the world. But right now, we turn to one of our faves, a friend of the program. He's the senior White House correspondent for NewsMax. I'm drinking out of my NewsMax coffee mug this morning. It's James Rosen. Jimmy Rose, good to talk to you, my friend.
Thank you both for having me.
So the President Biden, that is, called Donald Trump from the Oval Office, we presume, as is tradition. The sitting president calls the president-elect. A couple things of note here. First of all, he called Donald Trump before Kamala Harris officially conceded the election. Is there anything to read into that?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen a detailed TikTok of exactly which call took place when. My understanding was that the White House was sort of being held hostage to Vice President Harris's slowness to concede. And that the president's call, the sitting president's call to the president-elect was waiting on that to happen.
Oh, when I was discussing her actual official public announcement to Howard University, but maybe you're right. Maybe she did make that phone call. So now, first of all, any readout on what the content of that extraordinary, historic phone call might have been?
Well, from the White House, we hear that President Biden congratulated President-elect Trump, quote, on his victory, and emphasized his interest in a smooth transition, and invited Mr. Trump to meet with President Biden at the White House, as is also customary. And the disclosure from the White House was that the two staffs are working on a date in the near future.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to whether whether President Trump is going to give President Biden a red hat, a MAGA hat, or maybe Biden will just pull it out of his desk drawer and put it on his head for a little photo op. But
maybe
seriously,
a drink laced with something. Who knows?
Oh, yikes!
By the way, the other call that I thought would obviously be the one you'd really want to be a fly on the wall to hear, or at least both sides of it, was the call from Vice President Harris to President-elect Trump. Not much is known about that call. The vice president's operation is much more sparing with the details than the president's White House operation. But it doesn't take a great imagination to conjure the president-elect saying, "Thank you very much, Kamala, thank you." With deliberate restraint.
Good.
Well,
I'm glad
so
you're
James,
working on that one.
I think today, is it true that President Biden is expected to address the nation? And if so, what can we expect? Are they leaking or previewing anything that he's going to say?
Yes, he will be addressing the nation. And also, by the way, we're going to get our first White House press briefing from Karine Jean-Pierre since all of this went down.
Okay.
But we got some sense of what President Biden is going to say today from the announcement of the call to President-elect Trump and some of those themes that were discussed, that we just mentioned. But also, President Biden released a statement after Vice President Harris's concession speech at Howard University yesterday afternoon, in essence saying, "This was all of America saw the Kamala Harris that I know and admire." And he talked about in this statement, and I assume we will hear again today, about how she's going to continue to be a warrior with joy for the causes she believes in, and that she will continue to put her stamp on American life. In the vice president's concession speech at Howard yesterday, there was that one line where Ms. Harris said words to the effect of, "I concede this election, but I do not concede the fights that animated our cause."
Yes.
And that was a possible allusion to a possible future that Ms. Harris may envision for herself in national politics, maybe not in the electoral campaigns and election sense, but somehow she figures, I think, her role model might be someone like Hillary Clinton, that she can continue to contribute. Certainly, we can await the memoir and the media tour that will accompany said memoir. And of course, what we're all going to be looking for in that memoir is not so much a recitation of the vice president's life story, to which we've been thoroughly treated at this point, but some accountability or some accounting of what she saw in the debilitation of Joe Biden.
Yeah. Well, listen, it'll be clearly her future does not lie in electoral politics, not because of her ability to win another election, but I've been told by reliable sources that the election of Donald Trump as the 47th president would actually suspend our Constitution, force everybody in internment camps, and we will no longer have any elections. So, you know, I'm finding it strange that everyone's contemplating what she does next and whether she can run for president, because we're not going to have another presidential election. Unless, of course, they were just being hyperbolic and lying on the campaign trail, James. I'm
amazed that I even got this call through to the studio amid the apocalypse that I'm staring at.
That's correct. Well, you know, it's a lucky one.
To your point, Larry, that was another element in the vice president's appearance at Howard yesterday, where she essentially said, I know so many of you are feeling a range of emotions and feelings and experiences. But she said, I'm here to assure you that America's future will always burn bright.
Yeah.
And this is not a time for despair or throwing up our hands. It's a time for rolling up our sleeves. In other words, yes, the apocalypse we warned you about is not actually taking place.
Right. Thank
Everything's
you.
going to work out.
Thank you.
America's future will always burn bright.
Of course it will.
That
She's
was
right
too.
about that. It's just a far cry from the dark, dark nature of the final sale that she was trying to make and Barack Obama was making. James, what's the mood like at the White House? Come on, we want all the dirt. Is there a little spring in the step of Joe Biden that you see? Secretly, he's sort of feeling satisfied. This was win-win for him either way. If she wins, it's a validation of his presidency and legacy. If she loses, he can sit back and say, yeah, I would have won.
That's essentially correct. And, it's been a couple of days since I've been at the White House, I have to confess. So I won't presume to detail for our audience the quote-unquote mood there. Probably there's, it's an aggregate of many different moods. But look, there's been a tension between the Biden and Harris teams that obviously predated the president's surrender on July 21 and his decision to withdraw from the race. There was tension certainly at various points where there was grumbling whispered aloud by aides to Vice President Harris that they thought that President Biden was timing. We talked about this on this program, that he was timing his events poorly and sometimes stepping on the vice president. But then you had the final 48 hours or so where not only did you have President Biden talk about wishing to smack Donald Trump and like figures in a certain part of their posterior and make a grimace that looked like Shark Week.
Yeah, that's an ugly face, yes.
He had, of course, misspoken, I think, perhaps misspoken, certainly said something ill-advised or framed it in an ill-advised way when he referred to the president's supporters as garbage.
Yeah.
And the vice president had to spend a lot of time cleaning that up when she could have been prosecuting the case in a more affirmative way. That's not to say that would have been dispositive. The truth is, Vice President Harris, the Harris-Walz ticket, had so many built-in advantages. And as analysts and historians now begin to assess how and why such a well-endowed ticket, so to speak, with $1 billion and all the advantages of incumbency and the favoritism of segments of the news media and so on, why that ticket failed so spectacularly, both in the popular vote, which the Democrats haven't lost in 20 years, and in the Electoral College. I think the recurring theme that will emerge is that Vice President Harris, obviously an accomplished woman, obviously a strong figure in a number of ways, that she has a kind of authenticity problem. And, I never got a shot at interviewing her in this cycle, but I was amazed that nobody ever followed up with her. Everyone tried to ask her about the shifts in policy positions from 2019 until today. You were against fracking, now you're for it. You were for Medicare for all, now you're against it. You wanted to defund the police, now you don't, et cetera, et cetera. And she would always insist, but my values haven't changed. And nobody asked to me what to my eye seems the obvious question. So, Madam Vice President, do you want us to understand, are you training us, in fact, to believe that your policy positions are not expressions of your values?
Right, don't reflect your
and
values.
That's the core problem for her campaign. And the Trump campaign did a marvelous job in the hours before the polls opened on posting this eerie video where you had 3 vertical boxes stacked on top of each other with the vice president in different raucous campaign settings and different outfits, delivering the same words in the exact same timing with the exact same gestures, with the sound from all 3 of them sort of cascading on top of each other, and it created a kind of echo chamber effect. And it showed how scripted and stilted her campaign was. And again, at the bottom of all of this, one thing about Donald Trump, you might not like him very much, you might love him, but you're going to get Donald Trump unvarnished.
That's right.
And you're going to see what he stands for. And what he stands for might change from day to day or minute to minute, but you're always going to get the real deal, warts and all. And that can't be said for Vice President Harris, and I think that was the core of her problem.
James Rosen, senior White House correspondent at NewsMax, sums up that campaign
Thank
very
you, James.
well. Always great talking
work.
with you, sir.
Great
Looking
work.
forward to this. Is going to be a very interesting 2 months. You keep your head on a swivel. There's a lot of interesting things going down at that 1600 Pennsylvania, I think, and I know that you'll be covering it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.